Well, welcome everybody. This is exciting to have you participate with us. And I'll give a little background for those of you who don't know about the senior staff development classes, and then I'll introduce our guest. So about a year and a half ago, we got together as a senior staff development guild, and we sent out a survey asking all the senior staff where they wanted to be developed. And one of those areas was shepherding a team. And so we've had several things we've done to help develop senior staff in shepherding a team, and this is one of them. And so we have Jay Lorenzen. He's joining us here today, and so I'll introduce him. He has been on staff for 35 years. 30 of that he's been with the military, and then 5 of that he's been with Faculty Commons. He helps lead the informal Gospel in Action initiative, and then he and his wife Lori also lead. It's called If Properly Led Leadership Development Conference in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and some of you might have heard of that. I've heard that's a fantastic event. I'd like to do that sometime. He and his wife Lori have 4 married children and 12 grandchildren. And so, Jay, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited
Sure.
to hear all the things you have to say. So, go take it away.
Well, great. Thanks for taking some time to work through this. It's the first time I've done this, so it'll be a sort of a new experience for me. Some of you guys, I guess, have been joining the previous sessions. But anyway, I think we've got things situated where you can mute yourself, and there'll be times maybe we can kind of get into a little conversation as we're working through some of the material. So if it's all right with you, I'll just pray real quick that God will give us a good, helpful time and make use of the hour or so we have together. Lord, we love you. Thanks for the privilege of leading and shepherding teams, and would ask right now that you would work during our time, that you would give me clarity of thought, and Father, that we might be able to interact some on ways in which we can do a better job of shepherding the teams that you've given us. And we just love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, I'll stop on occasion to kind of just get some interaction, but if you have anything you want to, uh, stop and chat about, you can either unmute yourself or you can write a little chat to Stacy. And Stacy, you disappeared. Is that okay? Am I not supposed to see you anymore?
That's okay.
I
Yep,
just
I
wonder.
just turned off
Yeah,
my
okay.
video
All
so you
right,
don't have to
good.
look at me.
Okay. Yeah, I hate to just talk to myself for an hour. So anyway, that's fine. I guess you guys are there. But anyway, kind of just the title of this is just cause and community, the both and of leadership. One of the things that much of this material arose out of is this last 15 years of taking folks to the battle to Gettysburg and kind of walking through day by day the leadership decisions. And when I first went there, quite a while ago. I was still in active duty in the Air Force and kind of jogged around the battlefield and remembered some of the stories from the film or from the books that I read. It's one of the things I just couldn't imagine what enabled these men. They were mostly men at that time. To do this, and all of them, particularly in 1863, were volunteers. So the real question was, what was, what was it that motivated? How did these men do these kinds of things? It had to do something with leadership. And so I've been sort of exploring this whole leadership and shepherding a team using that sort of battlefield leadership as a background. So anyway, first slide here, if I can get it to come up, uh, is a model by out of a book by Gary Wills called Certain Trumpets. And it's Einstein once said, try to make things as simple as possible, but not any simpler. And to me, this particular model was extremely helpful in my own leadership journey when I to realize that leaders in every leadership situation, there are leaders, there are followers, there are shared goals. And I think one of the things that grabbed me from this model is that I understood that there are leaders and followers in the leadership environments that I have to lead, but it's this third quadrant here, or this third point of the triangle, is that there are shared goals. And some of the best leadership definitions sort of capture that. Gary Wills says in his book, a leader takes others to the object of their joint quest toward a goal shared by leaders and followers. Leadership is the art, Kozis and Posner in their book Leadership Challenge. Leadership is the art of mobilizing others to want to share, to struggle for shared aspirations. So one of the things I sort of realize is there are leaders and followers, but the reality is, even in the physical battlefield, much less the spiritual battlefield, is that followers don't follow leaders unless they share their goals. So this has been a very helpful, kind of challenge for me, in the sense of that I need to think as a leader about at least a set of relationships. First, I got to think about leaders and followers. What defines my relationship with those that I shepherd, those on my team, the movements that I lead? And then what is my relationship to the shared goals? And so that will be, in a sense, kind of the heart of this both and of leadership of cause and community. But before we go there, I wanted just to, one of the things I've begun to realize recently, even more so, is that not only do I need to be concerned about leaders and followers and my relationship to my followers as a leader or as a shepherd, my relationship to shared goals, but I also have to be intimately concerned about the relationship between followers and shared goals. Because if it's true that followers won't follow leaders unless they share their goals, then as a leader, I not only need to focus upon this relationship and this relationship, but also this relationship of followers to shared goals. So I wanted to start where I normally end, because I think I've been challenged personally just in my own thinking about some of this particular connection between followers and shared goals. So I have just sort of a summary statement that leadership involves, in part, our ability to call out of people a commitment to the deeper values of our shared cause. Okay, one of the things that has been particularly instructive, and I'm kind of a fan of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, and hopefully some of you have seen the movies Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. And I've been rereading The Hobbit over the last number of years, and chapter 1, is kind of sort of the unexpected party, to me is a classic example or illustration of how do I connect followers to shared goals. And if you remember, Bilbo Baggins is happily living in his little hobbit hole, and happy and smoking his pipe and enjoying good food and where he lived in the Shire, sort of disconnected from all the things that are raging outside of the Shire. And Gandalf shows up, and Bilbo Baggins is concerned about Gandalf because Gandalf, he says, seems to wherever Gandalf is, it says tales and adventures sprouted up all over the place wherever he went. And he says, I've heard of Bilbo Baggins, as he reflects on the visit of Gandalf, he says, well, I really like him. I know he had a relationship to some of my ancestors, but I'm a little nervous. And when Gandalf first shows up at the beginning of The Hobbit, he says, I have an adventure for you. I want to invite you on an adventure. And Bilbo Baggins says, well, we're simple folk, we hobbits, we not into adventures. They're disagreeable things, and they make us late for dinner. And he sort of rejected this notion. And if it's an interesting study, just the first chapter of The Hobbit. If we look at Gandalf as a leader, as someone who's calling Bilbo Baggins out of his comfort into an adventure, we realize that Gandalf is not just a storyteller, he's a story maker. And one of the things I think in our own leadership challenge is we need to be story makers. In other words, we need to connect our followers, those that we shepherd and have responsibility to this larger shared goal, this shared task, this great cause of which we're a part. And so part of the challenge, and I think something we've often forgotten when we get down into the leadership, is the role of calling people to this adventure and actually tapping into God's nature in them. And chapter 1, and it goes on actually through the whole book, is that Bilbo Baggins is always struggling between these two natures in himself. There's the Baggins nature, which likes to be comfortable in the Shire, and then there's this what they call his Took ancestors. And his great-grandmother or something is called Belladonna Took, and he realizes from stories about her that one of her ancestors might have married an elf. And then he had another one that was a great uncle by the name of Bullroar, who left the Shire and went to battle against the goblins. And so Tolkien wraps up this sort of conflict in the natures within Bilbo Baggins, that he is a hobbit, comfortable in his Shire, but he has within him this call to adventure. This desire to leave and to lay aside, as he says, my walking stick for a sword. And I think sometimes when we're in our own leadership tasks, we get so comfortable in our task that we in a sense, we act as if this shared goals to which followers have to be committed to is just something, as a job, as a work, as a project. I spoke to the summer project directors, and I think some of the summer project directors had led projects for 19 years, and I'm sure many of you have been on summer projects or been leading in areas, and it gets to be a project rather than a place in which kingdoms a transformation can take place, this adventure of what it means to follow Christ fully and to see kingdom change in every heart and every place. And so one of the things that I'm constantly challenged by this leadership model is that how do I call people to an adventure? What are the ways in which I help them stay connected to that shared goals that brought us to on staff with Crusade, or to building movements of evangelism, discipleship to bring kingdom change to the world, or however we word it. Am I thinking about it? And in chapter 1, one of the brilliant ways in which Gandalf structures this is he brings the dwarfs to Bilbo's little hobbit hole, and they pretty much take over, and he's just looking for comfort, and everything's gotten out as he tries to serve and make sure everybody has enough food. And it says that later on during the night, the dwarves began to sing, and they sang a song, and this is just part of it. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must ere break of day to seek the pale enchanted gold. Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day to claim our long forgotten gold. If you're familiar with the song, it goes on to say that a dragon had stolen all of the gold and had hoarded it and kept it, and they were going on this quest, this adventure to take back, to claim their long-forgotten gold. And we helped lead the first project into Haiti right after the earthquake. And some of you probably have been to Haiti, you're familiar with it. It's like the enemy, the dragon, has stolen all of the gold. When the French left, they cut down all the trees in 1804. All of the erosion happened on the other side. Same island connected to them is this island of the Dominican Republic that's increasingly is beautiful. It's this great, becoming increasingly a resort area. But Haiti has been this place in which the dragon has stolen all the gold. And part of the way in which we help challenge and connect the students and staff and faculty that were going on this project is saying, we are like Bilbo and his friends. We're going back to steal the gold that the dragon has stolen. In other words, this is not just a project in which we're going to Haiti and trying to train students and faculty. We're actually going to bring the kingdom to bear there in Haiti, and to take back that which the devil has stolen and robbed of the people there. And we're going to do it together with them, with the Haitian students that were involved with Cru, and we're going to start the process of stealing back the stolen gold. And I just share that illustration because I think sometimes, the power of poetry, the way we word things, the way we connect people to the shared goals that keep the leadership model moving forward is critical. And so, in a sense, that we are calling people, we are if we're going to shepherd well the team, we in a sense have to awaken in them this tookishness, this part that God has put in them that longs to be part of this of the kingdom process, the kingdom building process. And so I think Jesus did that when he says, seek first his kingdom, or he says the kingdom of God is like a treasure hidden in a field. We sell everything to go after it, or it's like the merchant who's looking for the pearl and he finds the pearl of great price and he sells everything. And so part of what I think our challenge is how do we connect followers to our shared goals? And so one of the first things I just want to, the ramifications of looking at that fairly simple model is that you and I, as we give leadership, and we'll talk about the critical tasks in a minute, is that we think of ways of tapping into this tookishness within the students and staff and volunteers that we work with, and we actually call them to an adventure. And so I'm going to actually, and Stacy, I don't know how this is going to work here, but I wanted just to stop here for a minute and just maybe if there are any questions or not so much questions, but any thoughts. Or maybe you can say, maybe there's some ways in which you yourself keep the sense of adventure in this job we call staff, or how do you remind yourself of the adventure? And I think one of the reasons we can't challenge people is this job has become a job, this project has become a project, this work on campus or wherever we happen to be working is just something we do as a job, and we've forgotten, in a sense, the adventure, the call that's behind it. So maybe some of you might be able, reflect maybe on some leaders who pulled out that sense of adventure in you, who tapped into that tookishness, or maybe some ways in which you yourself remind yourself of the adventure. So I'm just going to stop here and just see if anybody wants to jump in here. I'm not sure how you choose to do it, but I guess I think everybody's unmuted now, so whoever wants to jump in, if they want to, or if not, we'll press on.
Jay, this is Sean. I was thinking back when I was a student, the campus director challenged me to move into another co-op, which is like a small dorm of about 50. It was guys only, and at that point, there was no known believers in that co-op, and so they said, go in there and be a light in a dark place, and it was a dark. The way it was shaded by trees, and you go in there and just felt dark, just physically and then spiritually, So I don't remember it being like an amazing, call to an adventure, but it was, looking back on it, it was. I mean, it tapped into this desire I had to, be a light bearer, bring the gospel, be a messenger. And so, yeah, I can connect that story to what you're saying and see how that did tap into something deeper for me.
Sure. Yeah. It certainly calls you out of your comfort zone probably and puts you into a place where you felt a little bit unsafe or not so much comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely did.
Good, Sean. Thanks.
This is Stacy. For myself, what I think about is when I first got involved with Cru, when I was a freshman in college, and seemed like it was the little things that were kind of the scary things. Like we had an outreach, and they asked me to stand by the door with the chicken bucket and collect all the cards, and that was like the scariest thing for me because my friends would see me as kind of associating myself with these believers. Or when my discipler took me out and we put up posters, for our weekly meeting, and it just was really scary, but yet I had to kind of muster up strength to go do it. And so I just think of the little things like that, especially at the beginning, that was kind of terrifying, but yet it was quite adventurous to kind of put up posters. It was something simple, and I don't think about it now. It's like, oh, put up posters, but then it was he was really calling me to something greater.
Yeah. We used to read 30 so years ago, we used a book called Dedication and Leadership by Douglas Hyde, which was basically a story of the Communist Party in England, or the Marxist Party in England, in the 1940s or 50s or something like that. And the whole story was around someone they didn't think had anything to contribute, and they basically said, well, all he can do is hand out brochures, or all he can do is stand on the street corner and invite people to these socialist or Marxist meetings, and because they didn't believe he had anything to offer. And then eventually, because he started in this process, he eventually became one of the key leaders in the movement there. And that was a book we used to read within Crusade a long, long time ago, and I don't know if anybody reads that anymore. But that's just kind of right along with what some of you guys are sharing. So good. Anybody else?
A couple things I think of is one is just there is the value in staying open to trying new things for yourself to keep yourself in the adventure, and two is a willingness to really allow followers to try new things that you have to be willing to give up control and not feel like you will know or have to make the outcome.
Yeah, it's good. Anybody else?
Jay, I was just thinking, again, it just speaks to the importance of relationship and knowing the person. So as a leader and a follower of that relationship, to be able to speak in terms that resonate in their heart. So I think, as I've been learning about life coaching, one of the techniques is as you listen to people, when you ask a question, use the words that they've been using. It's just a simple technique, but that
Right.
really helps them trust that you're listening and you know them and you believe in them. And
Right.
so just kind of taking that technique and blowing it up a little bit larger in a leadership follower relationship. It just speaks, I think, to that value of really knowing the person so you can speak in with terms and ways that are going to speak to them in terms of adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Many of you know Greg Lilstrand. I mean, he's a lot younger than I am, but he's probably one of the leaders I respect most within Crusade, and he's heading up Cruise City now. But I've heard him speak a number of times, and one of the things he always says, and goes right along with what you just said, is that we always need to consider relationships first, and it's just kind of a memory thing. So whenever I'm in a leadership environment, relationships first. And that's really helped me, and I think it's been very helpful to the staff and volunteers that he's led over time, and just his own model of leadership. So, good point. One of the challenges that I think many of us, and I've learned this at Gettysburg, is kind of, when people go up in rank, they get further away from the battlefield, and I think one of the reasons we can't call out people to these adventures, to these deeper values of our shared task, is that we become people who actually are pretty far away from the battlefield ourselves. And so, because we tend, as we go up in responsibility, we start sending people rather than being sent. And one of the critical things, particularly in the Gospel of John, is that we are a sent people. As Jesus says in, John 20, that as the Father sent me, so I send you. And sometimes I think we've forgotten that. And I know for sure for us, when we were leading the ministry at the Academy for about 15 years, we used to take people on summer projects. We used to be at the forefront of this, and it got increasingly difficult with 4 kids and stuff. We started just sending people, not going ourselves, and just as a result of beginning to understand battlefield leadership and making application to spiritual leadership to the spiritual battle, is to realize that I myself need to be kind of one who is being sent himself, and that I need to be captured and participant in the adventure. And one of those times, I remember we were sending folks, and then we had a project with the Project Arrow in Albania. We're going to show the Jesus film, and I'd been sending people for summers. We'd stop going on the summer project, and we were sending cadets around the world to joining other ministries and stuff on projects, but we weren't going ourselves, and happened to be convicted by my own stuff, and went that summer, and it was literally one of the most amazing summers I've ever had in my own experience, to be back in the kind of the front lines of the battle. So anyway, I encourage you as you go up in responsibility within Crusade, to find opportunities to stay in the adventure and to move on. Okay, well, let's Stace, let's go ahead and mute everybody, and then we'll if that's all right, and then we'll come back and stop again. Let me just kind of press this so we
Sounds great. I'll just have everybody mute themselves, and so then you can unmute you and when you need to.
Okay, all right.
So
all right,
if everybody could mute themselves, that'd be great.
Everybody know how to do that, I assume, I guess. Okay, I want to go back to our leadership model. We talked just briefly about there's a lot to be said in kind of the language of leadership and the way in which we communicate the power of the shared goal, the shared cause, the shared task. And we could probably talk about that and before, but I now want to kind of turn primarily to the, if we go back to this rather simple model of Gary Wills, that if I'm going to keep leadership as simple as possible, then there are 2 primary relationships that I have. One is my relationship to followers, and my other is my own personal relationship to the shared goals. And so I wanted to go to a particular passage, and it's right here in Numbers 27:12 to 23. And to me, this is one of the more critical passages on leadership in all of the scriptures, partly because of what's known as in, many of you I'm sure have been to seminary, have certainly had lots of training in the scriptures, is there's sort of what they call the law of the first mention. And right here it talks about, so that the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd. That little phrase there, this is the first time in the scriptures that phrase is used, and it's picked up later on in a number of other places, Ezekiel 34. But one of the primary places it's picked up was when it describes Jesus' ministry in Matthew chapter 9, where it says Jesus is going from village to village preaching the kingdom, healing people. And he says, and he was broken in his heart and compassionate, for the people were like sheep without a shepherd. And the first thing Jesus says when he sees that, he calls everybody together and he says, pray to the Lord of the harvest, he would send forth laborers into this harvest, for people were like sheep without a shepherd. In other words, that in a sense, Jesus is saying, pray for shepherds, for these sheep without a shepherd. So this particular passage in Numbers 27 has been highly enlightening to me, and it's a succession passage. Moses has led the people across the desert. They're right at the edge of the promised land, and Moses records in Numbers 27 this particular passage. So let me just read it real quickly. It says, and the Lord said to Moses, go up this mountain in the Abraham range and see the land I've given to the Israelites. After you've seen it, you too will be gathered to your people as your brother Aaron was. For when the community rebelled at the waters in the desert of Zin, both of you disobeyed my command to honor me as holy before their eyes. These are the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the desert of Zin. Moses said to the Lord, may the Lord, the God of the spirits of all mankind, appoint a man over this community to go out and come in before them, one who would lead them out and bring them in, so that the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd. So the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Have him stand before Eleazar the priest and the entire assembly, and commission him in their presence. Give him some of your authority so that the whole Israelite community will obey him. He will stand before Eleazar the priest, who will obtain decisions for him by inquiring of the Urim before the Lord. At his command, he and the entire community of the Israelites will go out, and at his command they will come in. Moses did as the Lord commanded. He took Joshua and had him stand before Eleazar the priest and the whole assembly. Then he laid hands on him and commissioned him as the Lord had instructed Moses. Now, there is so much in this particular passage we can't even begin to grasp. I'm going to focus on what would end up being verses 15 to 17. But right here at the beginning, Moses is told that he doesn't get to go in the promised land. If you remember, rather than speaking to the rock and water being brought forth, Moses and Aaron say, shall we ourselves bring forth water from the rock? And they strike the rock, and God provides water for the people. But he pulls Moses and Aaron aside. You've rebelled against me here because you dishonored me and took, in a sense, glory to yourselves as leaders, and it was I who provided the water for the people, not you. And so there's so much in there about just how is within our own leadership we're tempted to take glory to ourselves and fail to realize it's God who happens to put us in places of leadership where we can we can be the vehicle by which he provides refreshment to the people that we lead. Anyway, there's a whole lot here, but one of the things that constantly strikes me, and this is why I think Moses is one of the greatest of all leaders in the Old Testament, as well as one who, in a sense, knew God face to face, and is what his first thought was when he realizes that after leading the people for 40 years, nursing them across, as he says in Numbers 11, nursing them across the desert in the face of all the rebellion and all the sin of the people, his first thought is not what my first thought would be. His first thought was okay, who's going to be in charge of the people after I'm gone? In other words, his first thought is about the successor generation. And, I think it's a helpful thing that keeps us humble in our own leadership is to constantly ask the question, who is going to be my successor? And preparing that person or persons to do what God has called me to do. It keeps us humble and keeps us out of the center, in a sense, when we're concerned, when we realize that none of us is irreplaceable, that someday, we'll need a replacement. So there's a lot there. I just want to mention that. But I want to focus primarily on how Moses envisioned leadership, the primary task that this person, whoever it was, that would assume responsibility for the community of Israel. Okay, and so he words it right here in 15 through 17. It says, may the Lord appoint over this community a person to go out and to come in before them, one who will lead them out and bring them in, so that the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd. And then the Lord actually reinforces what Moses has said here when he says, take Joshua here. He says, at his command, he and the entire community of the Israelites will go out, and at his command will come in. Okay. So maybe we can unmute here for a second. If you've been to Gettysburg or heard me speak on this, maybe just hold back a little bit. But just the rest of you are looking at this passage afresh, maybe for the first time. What do you think that Moses is referring to in this sort of Hebrew idiom to go out and come in, lead them out, and bring them in? So I don't know, Stacy, you want to try that and see if we can get some interaction here? Okay, it looks like most of you are unmuted yourself. If you want to just jump in here, what do you think Moses is referring to here? Anybody want to take a stab at it?
This is Cody. I have no idea what he's talking about, but the picture that comes to mind, is the movie We Were Soldiers, when Mel Gibson was the first one to step out of the helicopter and the last one to step on, and that kind
Very
of picture.
Good. Yeah. Good. Good. First one in, last one out. Great, perhaps picture of what Moses is trying to capture here. Other folks, what could it mean? I mean, if this is the first mention, let me just kind of put some weight on this passage for a minute. If this is the first mention of like sheep without a shepherd, and I know you had some time with Gary Runn and the work he's done on the shepherd is one of the primary, if not the primary metaphor for leadership in the scriptures. What could Moses be thinking of here?
Well, this is Gina. I don't know if you can hear me, but
I can, Gina. Go ahead. Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, this is toward the end of Moses' life, and so because later he says he's laying hands on Joshua. So just this idea of kind of setting up. I mean, earlier he had picked the judges to judge over the different groups, but kind of maybe this idea, going back to the shepherd, I mean, I feel like you come back to this, but the idea like, what is leadership supposed to look like? And so it has, like Cody said, that kind of to be with them and go with them. But it also has that leadership sense too, because to go out, but to come in before them. So there is a sense where the leader is a step ahead, and kind of knows where he's going. So that element of someone special, not just we as a group go out, but someone that's willing to take the role of, I'm going to look and see what's ahead and where I need to lead my people. Because being desert people, I've lived a bit in the desert. They know that water's just not everywhere. And shelter's not just everywhere. So this idea of caring. So that's my thought.
That's great, Gina. Thank you. That's really insightful stuff. So, yeah, it's an interesting little way this passage is worded. And let me just kind of share a little bit. It uses two when it first says, appoint a man over this community to go out and come in before them. It uses two very simple Hebrew verbs that mean just to go out and come in. Basically, if you went out the door and you came in the door or something like that. It's very simple, very common words here. He says, appoint a person over this community to go out and to come in before them. And then when he repeats the phrase here, one who will lead them out and bring them in, he actually uses the same two verbs. My translation, ESV, says lead them out or bring them in. Yours may say something different. But it says one who causes them to go out. Well, the word here, the lead them out, translated lead them out, is the same verb that's added what they call, in Hebrew, a hifel prefix, which means to cause. So this is, if we were to read this exactly using that hifel prefix understanding and not translate it into English, it says, appoint a man over this community to go out and come in before them, one who will cause them to go out and cause them to come in, so that the Lord's people will not be like sheep without a shepherd. So it repeats the same verb, someone who's willing to go out and come in, but one who will cause the people of God or the community of Israel to go out and cause them to come in. Okay, so that's exactly, in a sense, how the word is used. Now, it's a Hebrew idiom, and we can't understand it per se by just looking at this passage, but it's used in several places. 1 Samuel 8, when it describes Saul, and in 1 Samuel 18 when it talks about David. And so I want to go to this passage. The same verb pair is used, and then I want us to ask the question, okay, where are they going out to and where are they coming into? Okay, when David goes out, where is he going? When David comes in, where is he coming into? When David is causing them to go out, where are they going? When he causes them to come in, where are they going? Okay, or where are they coming into? Okay, so this is right after the, when David begins to rise in the ranks of Israel because of killing Goliath. Okay, so it says here, so David went out wherever Saul sent him and prospered, and Saul set him over the men of war. And it was pleasing in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. It happened as they were coming in, when David returned from killing the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. The women sang as they played, and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Skipping down to verse 12. Now Saul was afraid of David, for the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed him from his presence, and appointed him as commander of 1,000, and he went out and came in before the people. David was prospering in all his ways, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw that he was prospering greatly, he dreaded him, but all Israel and Judah loved David, which, by the way, in the Psalms is called the shepherd, the shepherd of Israel. All of these, because basically he went out and came in before them, because he caused them to go out and caused them to come in. Okay, so where let's start out. Where are they coming into? Okay, it's pretty clear, so I won't turn on the mics unless you want to. Well, let's go ahead and do it. Why not? Anybody, where are they coming into? Is this too obvious a question? Or maybe, okay, let me just add, okay, they're coming back into camp, okay, or coming back into the city. Now, let's ask this question. What happens when they come back? Anybody want to jump in here?
Seems like they're having some kind of a party.
Right. Good.
They're celebrating.
Yeah, there's some kind of a party. Certainly the women are coming out, and why would they be singing and dancing? Their brothers, their husbands, their sons have returned back to the safety of the camp. What else? What else happens? Not only is there a party, if you had been out fighting the Philistines and were returning, what else would happen when you came into the camp? Probably. Put yourself in a war frame of mind. What would be happening? Not only would people be singing, there would be a party, but what else? Anybody?
I think there would be food.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Right, there'd be food. You've probably been living in the camp. You're hungry, so there would be lots of food. There would be part of the celebration would be this refreshment and nourishment that you would need, having been fighting against the Philistines out there. There's probably also a good chance that you would probably be healing. Those who returned. I forget who it was, Sean or Stacy or somebody had mentioned, or Cody had mentioned the movie, the book, about, the first one in, the last one out. You make sure you bring everybody home. You leave nobody behind. It's kind of a common within the Marines and the Army today. You leave no man behind. And so actually, if you've seen the latest movie on that, Lone Survivor, the largest concern was get those bodies home of those who had been killed. So, those bodies would have been brought home. They had been given a burial. We see in verse 7 that poetry is written about them. So these folks, when they're coming back in, when David is returning back in, he's causing them to come into a place of safety, a place of nurture, a place of care, a place of celebration, in which songs are sung and poetry is written to honor those. Okay, now the the other part of the scenario is that when they go out, if the best shepherds cause people to go out and cause people to come in, when they cause them to go out, they actually cause them to go out, obviously, into battle, into a particularly unsafe place. And so David not only goes out and comes in before them, he causes them to go out into the battle, and then he causes them to come in. Okay, now let me just introduce you to, see if we got, let me just kind of, I guess maybe I put these slides somewhere else. Oh no, let's switch to those slides, Sean, that we had put in. I wanted to introduce, this is probably Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, commander of 20th Maine, former professor at Bowdoin College, left Bowdoin College because of his commitment to Jesus Christ to fight for the North in the U.S. Civil War. He ended up being commander of the 20th Maine by the time he gets to Gettysburg. He doesn't know much about warfare, but he's one who's committed to learn, and so he's reading all the time. But in the process, he would go on to be one of the leading battlefield commanders in all of the Union Army, which is desperately short of good battlefield commanders compared to the Confederate Army. He becomes one of the best at it, and he would survive the war and go on to be governor of Maine, and quite the character, but committed Christ follower. His mom wanted him to be a preacher. His dad wanted him to be a soldier. He wanted to be a professor, but he ended up being in a sense, all three. Committed follower of Jesus Christ. His younger brother was part of the U.S. Christian Commission, a guy by the name of John Chamberlain, which was like Crew during the period of time. It was actually a part of the YMCA when it was much more evangelistic in the day, that would accompany the soldiers and share the gospel with them. Anyway, he, in the process of developing as a leader, he learned two things from his commander. He says, if you want to lead men well in battle, and I think I'm convinced this applies not only to the physical battle but to the spiritual battle that we lead, is you must care for your men's welfare and you must show physical courage. And so in a part, he's driven by these two realities. And when he thinks about battlefield leadership, if he wants to keep it as simple as possible, but not any simpler, he's constantly in his biography and other places when he writes about the war, he's thinking about these two things. How do I care for my people? And then where am I personally displaying physical courage in the battle? Okay? All right. So if we go and put everything we've learned from Numbers 27 and 1 Samuel 18 into our model, plus Chamberlain's sense of the two critical qualities for every leader, is that when I think about my relationship between leaders and followers, my primary role is to cause them to come in to a place of caring, community, celebration. In other words, to care for my men's welfare. But then on the other hand, when I think about the shared goals, when I think about the shared task that brings us together, the cause, in Chamberlain and in David's situation, it was the battle with the Philistines, is the primary responsibility I have, if I'm going to shepherd my team well, is to have this sort of caring relationship with my followers, leading them into a place of community caring and celebration, and leading them out into the battle, in which I need to display courage in those two. And so this is, in a sense, to me, critical. Let's go back to the other slides. Thanks, Stace. And so when you think about leading, if you think about it, okay, if I have to give leadership to the team that I'm responsible for, and I want to keep it as simply as possible, then the two things I ought to constantly be thinking about is, okay, where am I leading people into a place of community, caring, and celebration? Okay, where am I causing them? If we use the hifel prefix on the Hebrew verb, it's not just lead means to cause to come in, okay? To lead in is to cause to come in to a place of community, caring, and celebration. And what's interesting about this place of community, caring, and celebration is that it's a safe place. In other words, I have to cause people to come into a place of safety. and I'm sure all of us have been parts of teams, parts of projects in which the team in which we were part of was not safe. There wasn't a sense of community, caring, or celebration. It was, in a sense, an unsafe place rather than a safe place. And, no poetry was written, no songs were sung. There isn't this nurture of the food and the community. But so just want you to keep that safe idea in mind. Okay, so one responsibility is if I'm going to care for my men's welfare, my people's welfare, if I'm going to cause them to come in, I need to cause them. That's part of my role as a shepherd. I mean, even as Moses defines it, and later on God would say, at his command they shall go out, and at his command they shall come in. In other words, when the scriptures think about leadership, particularly the shepherd role, if you simplify it completely, those two things are the critical elements: to cause people to come into a place of community, caring, and celebration, into a safe place. The other part is I need to be a person who causes people to go out. I need to lead them out, in a sense, to the place of battle, conflict, adventure, quest, what sociologists call the places of liminality. Now, liminality is just a fancy phrase that means, where we lead people out to a threshold, out to the margins, out to places of ordeal where true advance is made. In other words, that's kind of liminality. So a battlefield would be a place of liminality. It'd be a place of conflict, adventure, quest. It's not staying at home in the Shire. It's going out to fight dragons. Okay? And that is the other, in a sense, responsibility. What's interesting about this place, however, in contrast to our leading in, is that we're actually leading people out into unsafe places. Okay? To places that are challenging, that are places of liminality, to places where advance is really made. Okay? Now, where that, in a sense, leads us is, and let's just reflect a little bit on this shepherd role and how the scriptures envision it. And just think in your mind Psalm 23. And Psalm 23, very familiar to us, the Lord is my shepherd. And what does the Lord as a shepherd do? There are two things that he does in Psalm 23. Okay, I'm going to turn the mics on because I've been talking too much here. Or you guys turn on the mics if you want to. All right, think through Psalm 23, very familiar passage. What are the two? Where does the shepherd lead the sheep? You guys still out there? Go ahead, somebody. Help us out.
To food, safe places to lie down.
Right. Awesome. Green pastures, gentle streams, all of those things you probably learned from Gary on the shepherd takes them to places, because sheep, are very fearful of rushing streams, and they'll overeat the fields, and so you have to move them constantly to places of nurture and safety and, in a sense, togetherness where they can be protected and eat well. But, we sometimes say we remember that part, but we forget the last part of the psalm. Where else do they go? Shall lead me through the valley of death.
Mm-hmm.
The presence of my enemies.
Yeah, into the presence of my enemies. So the shepherd not only leads people into places of safety, but also leads them, and that's where his rod and staff comfort us, into places that are unsafe, into the presence of enemies, into the shadow of death. Okay, now let's switch gears to Mark chapter 3. And when Jesus, you're all familiar, I'm sure many of you have taught on this passage, when Jesus calls his disciples at the beginning of their ministry, he spends all night in prayer, and he chooses those that he wants. And do you remember what it says when he says, when he calls them, he says, I call you to two things. You remember that from Mark chapter 3? Let me find it, and word it more correctly here. Does anybody remember what he calls them to? It says in chapter 3, verse 13 and 14, he says, he went up on the mountain and called to him those whom he desired, and they came to him. And he appointed 12, whom he named apostles, which, you know, the word apostles means to be sent. So, and here are the two things, so that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach and have authority to cast out demons. So when Jesus, in a sense, calls his disciples, he calls them to two things, that they might be with him where? Perhaps in a place of community, caring and celebration and nurture and teaching and learning, that they might be the band of 12 that would, you know, in a sense, be a metaphor for the tribes of Israel, that they would be this community of friends, this company of friends. But then he also calls them, and then later on in Mark and in Luke and in Matthew, he sends them out to preach and to have authority in spiritual places, you know, to cast out demons. He literally sends them out into the battle, and he has to send them two by two because they're going like sheep among wolves. And so when Jesus, in a sense, calls his disciples, he calls them two things. He calls them to community, and then he calls them to this greater task, this shared place of adventure and battle and conflict. Okay? And I could go on and on and on, but once you begin to see these things in the scriptures, you'll see them everywhere. The last two images we have of Jesus in the book of Revelation is Jesus is the bridegroom at the wedding supper of the Lamb. There's a place of community, caring, and celebration. You know, at the end of time, he's the bridegroom, he's the host. He's making sure the deeds are accounted of what the church has done. There's an honoring of the beauty of the bride there. There's this beautiful celebration. And then right after that, he's the rider on the white horse, his train dripped in blood, leading the armies in this battle against evil. And so those two things dominate, in a sense, the scriptures. And so they become critical elements. So as we keep those two things in mind. Now, so as you think about your own leadership and, you know, of the teams, these are the two things that I would and these are the two things that I try in my own leadership to say, okay, where am I building community? Where am I causing people to come into a safe place? Where am I causing people to be celebrated and cared for and nurtured? Where am I caring for my men's welfare? And then on the other hand, okay, where am I causing them to go out in sort of a counterintuitive place, a place that is unsafe, into a place of conflict and adventure and quest, where we turn our walking sticks into swords? And, you know, those are the two, I think, that Moses is getting at. Says, when Joshua takes over, I need someone who's going to bring him back to a place of safety in this community and nurture and community and worship and honoring of one another. But I also need someone to go out and fight the battles of the Lord. I need someone to cause them to go out. So I think that those two things are critical. Now, the problem with most of or not, this isn't a problem with most of our teams. This is just a problem with some of our teams. But this is, to me, when you think about community, we have this sort of situation. I can either have a community that's safe or that's unsafe. So the people enjoy coming together or they dread coming together. And we all know that most of the missionaries that come home is not because of the challenge of the cause per se, but it's because of the breakdown of the community, the team, the unit integrity, the sense of oneness in which we're together. And so when we think about community, what we need to think about is says, okay, I have to cause people to come into a place of safety, a safe community in which the women are singing and the food is being served and poetry is being written and the wounds are being healed and the great things that God did through us are being celebrated. Okay, so I want to bring people into a safe community. So this is the only thing that works, really. Okay, now when we get down to the cause, and to me this is one of the interesting things, I learned this again from just my own study of battlefield leadership, is when we think about the cause, the only thing that works here is the cause has to be unsafe. In other words, there has to be an adventure, a challenge, a threshold, an ordeal. Because if the cause is safe, let's just, if all we did was Bible study, or all we did was our weekly meeting, or, it might be scary for a few folks who are hosting it, or if all we did was stay in our dorm room and read our scriptures or whatever, or we had this community of friends, in other words, the cause is safe. It's not scary anymore. One of the realities in warfare is that an army on the move has the best morale. Outside of Gettysburg before the first day, and I'm sorry, most of my illustrations come from there, but the Confederate Army was camped about 8 miles away in a little place called Cashtown. There were 20,000 of them, and they'd spent a couple days there playing cards and in camp. And then the order came on July 1st to march towards Gettysburg, and they knew a battle was coming. And apparently those who were behind, who followed behind the armies, they noticed that there were playing cards were thrown on the ground. Dice was thrown on the ground. Gurley pitchers were thrown on the ground. And it's like the army was shedding itself of its own kind of sin, in a sense, because they were going into a place of unsafety and a place of challenge. And so, morale is terrible when the cause is safe, but in an unsafe place, the morale becomes becomes heightened, because we need one another. We're dependent upon one another. Okay, now this is described by sociologists, this combination of safe community as an unsafe cause is a thing called communitas. In other words, where there's a safe community, but we're on a mission, a quest, or cause that is unsafe. There's a great phrase when I think about leadership. My role is to be part of a company of friends in the pursuit of this great, dangerous, wonderful, challenging cause. Okay, so now, Sean, why don't we switch to the clip here, and some of you have seen Alan Hirsch talk about this, but let's go ahead.
Communitas is a community formed in the context of an ordeal, a challenge, a task, a mission that requires each player to find each other in a new significant way to get the job done. Friends become comrades, team players. All movements that change the world seem to have a comradeship and a sense of each other's backs that we tend to lack in Western expressions of church. If you aim for ministry, you never get to mission, even if you intend to do it. However, if you aim at mission, you get ministry as well, because ministry is the means by which you do mission. If you organize and rally around the flag of mission, that is what we do outside of the church, in Jesus' name, you have to do ministry along the way, because ministry is the means by which you must do mission. In other words, you have to be loving, you have to be serving, you have to do it together in order to actually achieve your mission, because you're not going to achieve it otherwise. So communitas takes place along the way of trying to do something that requires that we learn to love each other in a deep and more profound way as a group of brothers and sisters who rely on each other very deeply and are very disappointed when someone maybe doesn't fulfill their task within a given framework, because we really do need each other to survive. I do think that Christians are very risk-averse, and churches are very, very risk-averse. They are not places that you normally associate with adventure or risk or creativity. Because here's the deal. If you want to be creative, you have to risk failure. If you want to achieve something beyond the status quo, you have to get out of the status quo, which means you're not going to make everyone happy. But the problem is, without that, you never go anywhere. And so you're stuck with the stifling status quo, which I think is what many churches are stuck in, because we've cultivated this kind of safety awareness, this middle-class obsession with safety and security. I'm afraid that that will kill us in the end. A little bit of danger is good for us, a risk. It doesn't always have to be death-defying. Doing a job that pushes us out of our comfort zones is very good for us. I think that in America, we self-identify as largely a middle-class society. And like I said, there's nothing evil about being middle-class, but one of the bad things about middle-class culture is its obsession with safety and security, comfort and convenience, right? There's no question about that. That's the bad side. It's this need to kind of secure the kids, But when that becomes obsessive, it's dangerous to the gospel, because it attenuates the gospel, because the gospel calls that into question. So what we do is we have to resolve the tension, and we usually do it in the name of the family. So the gospel becomes this kind of civil religion that really just affirms my lifestyle. So I think that what a middle-class America, therefore a middle-class church, easily co-opts Christianity to be the civil religion. And it's really the country club atmosphere, no threat. It's just nice, safe, it's just part of my world. It's my religious aspect of my world, but I don't experience adventure or journey or quest over there at all. But real adventure, real journey, real quest, where we're stakeholders in the outcome, where our bodies are on the line, I don't think so. It doesn't happen very often. It's good for us. If it doesn't kill you, it's going to make you a lot stronger, but it could kill you. Let's acknowledge that. But you don't have to be that far out where it's like death-defying, but I think you've got to put yourself out a little bit. But the wonderful thing is you'll learn and you'll find Jesus in new ways, and you'll learn to trust God in new ways too. And let's see what God can do through us.
All right. Now let's go back, Sean, if we could. I don't know that you're familiar with Alan Hirsch. If you haven't read any of his works, The Forgotten Ways is great. That particular clip, if you just go to YouTube and put Verge, V-E-R-G-E, Alan Hirsch, you can find a series of great little videos emphasizing the kind of forgotten ways of movement building. Great stuff. Anyway, just an advertisement there. So we need to wrap up here. So if you can go, 2 critical qualities for every shepherd leader. We have to be people who cause people to come in. We care for our people's welfare, and we demonstrate courage in the shared cause, and we cause them to go out. And we remember that this shared cause has to be, in a sense, defined as as something that's an adventure, a quest, something that's unsafe. So we lead people into safe places, and we have the courage to lead them out into the shared cause. Okay, I'm going to wrap up here shortly. But I want to just do one quote from Chamberlain to me that has been a very helpful sort of metaphor reminder. Chamberlain is actually talking about one of his men, one of his successors, who was wounded in action, and this is how it goes. He says, Chamberlain writing, I came upon brave old Sickle lying calm and cheerful with a shattered limb and weakened by loss of blood while fighting it through, but refusing to have more attention than came in his turn. Still pictured in my mind his splendid action where I left him rallying his men. I sat down by him to give him such cheer as I could. He seemed to think I needed the comforting. The heroic flush was still on his face. General, he whispers up to Chamberlain, you have the soul of the lion and the heart of the woman. And Chamberlain replied, take benediction to yourself. You could not have thought that if you hadn't been it yourself. And that was our thought at parting for other trial and through after years. For so it is, might and love, they are the all. The fatherhood and the motherhood of God himself and of every godlike man or woman. We have the soul of the lion that causes people to go out into the battle. We have the heart of the woman that cares for people, that causes them to come into a place of community, caring, and celebration. It's not surprising when Paul describes in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, his ministry, he says, we not only shared the gospel with you, but we also, shared our very lives. And he goes on to say, we were like a nursing mother caring for you. And we were like an encouraging father, encouraging you and giving you courage in the battle. And so those two things seem to me the critical aspects of being the shepherd leader, of causing people to come into a place of community, caring, and celebration, causing them to go out into the battle, making sure that we communicate this adventure of what it means to be that we share together. So I'm pretty much done here. If we want to just have a few comments or something, we can do that, and we can wrap up. I'm getting close to the end of my time. So if anybody wants to add some comments or has some some things they've seen in their own leadership journey that have been helpful, why don't you just jump in and comment?
I had a question.
Sure.
I think I love the idea of establishing the safe community, but I know that doesn't happen it takes time. So, in the midst of establishing the community that people feel cared for, and just like how you described it, how do you continue to lead out into the unsafe adventure? Because you can't neglect that part. I don't know.
Right. It's it's this constant tension. Some of us are people, and some of us are task people. Some of us are oriented towards a cause. Some of us are oriented towards community. And I think one of the things in order to kind of balance our leadership is we have to, maybe lean in the ways in which we're probably not normally. I remember just in my own leadership failures in the past in the Air Force, I never liked the coffee room discussions, the gatherings around the water fountain, or the Friday night kind of beer calls at the officers club. Because I was committed to the cause of our department at the academy and some other things, and I was highly committed to the job and the cause itself, but I didn't make this community a priority. And looking back, I said that was a major leadership failure on mine, because the people didn't realize that I really cared for them. They saw me leading the cause. And so I think, some of us may lead towards community. And so my personal problem is I led most of the time towards the cause, and I belittled the coffee, the conversations, the time together, the playing ball together, doing something together, shopping, or could be anything that was community giving. So I think one of the challenges for us is to say, okay, how can I balance? And to me, that's the way it is. Okay, I'm constantly asking my leadership journey, am I causing people to come in? Am I causing them to go out? Okay, and those are two things that, just kind of off the top of my head,
Okay.
to help me balance it, is to force myself to lean in a direction I'm not normally easy at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
thank you.
sure, no, and I think if the adventure is so compelling, and I'm so captured by kingdom transformation, about kingdom change, about this thing that we're about as Christ followers, if I stay intimately connected to that, it makes me want to be involved in pulling people together in a powerful way. So,
Yeah.
good.
Jay,
Any other thoughts?
yeah,
Yeah, go
Jay,
ahead.
this is more of a question, maybe through your reading or experiencing. Maybe it's because I'm on a metro team, but I find often the challenge is the scope. You know what I mean? Like, I've got a couple campuses, a variety of different students. I mean, do you have any, as you studied leadership, how do you try to create this kind of community, and yet your time is so limited?
Right. Yeah, I'll speak in-house a little bit. I think one of the challenges is that, even Dr. Bright, and God love him, and it meant so much to me in my own journey in ministry. He says, fulfilling the Great Commission in this generation, and I think we sense the responsibility of this great task, and we only have a simple, limited time in which to accomplish it and to get to our scope. And I think, in part, we want that motivation to be there because Jesus longs that everyone would know him and that every injustice would be righted in the world. But the simple reality is we're not going to get to it all. The movements, real movements that bring change, have to take a long, long time. And so while I sense the pressure of scope and the pressure of the leadership of the scope, of the leaders above me trying to push me towards the scope, I need to stay balanced in the sense that I cannot, unless there are for example, successor generations at that campus I'm trying to reach, if there are not disciples and leaders that are built there, if there are not Joshuas ready to go, then that movement, even though I might get some progress, is not going to last. And so while the pressure would be to get to scope, the simple reality is that developing leaders takes a long time. And so we just have to give ourselves the permission to go, not only, I like to think of scope in multiple directions, not only go to the next place, but to go deep at a place is also scope. And over time is another scope. Our traditional scope focus, is in order to kind of keep the pressure, in a sense, on us and make sure we buy into the heart of God, and which is God is concerned obviously for everyone, is that we only think of scope as the next place. We don't think of scope as going deep where we are or at this other place, or building in a movement that's going to last for a long time, over time. So one of the ways I do is I think of scope in all of those areas. And then I just realize relationships first. It's going to take time. This stuff is not wasted when I build community, because a community that's healthy, that captures the vision, that is led at times into this great unsafe cause, are the ones that are actually going to last. So I may be a little out of school, but that's kind of how I handle that tension.
Somebody asked a question in the chat here a little bit ago. It said, do you think we tend toward one or the other more in Cru?
Well, I mean, I think we go through, like these kind of cycles, where we'll emphasize, cause, and then we'll go back to community, and then we'll emphasize evangelism, we'll go back to discipleship, and we have this sense in which we kind of go back and forth. And I think there are some regions that are led and they're very strong in let's say cause, and they're very not as strong in community. And I wouldn't put one of them at top or the other, because I think both of them, as I've tried to make the argument, are critical, that really the gospel goes forward like this when we're doing both. So I don't know. I think we go through the challenge, different emphasis at time, and then there'll be a new audacious goal that we'll set to kind of push us in a direction to remind us of the cause. And then we'll kind of say, all of a sudden we pursued this cause, now we don't have leaders anywhere. And then we'll fall back into community. So I think the challenge is, wherever we are in a ministry, is you have responsibility where you are, and where you lead is to balance both of those. And regardless of whether the ministry up and down is right now, would be my thought or response to that. I'm going to draw a little diagram here. I don't know whether you can see it. Is that coming through, Stacy?
Yep, you betcha.
Okay. To me, this is, and I learned this from Parker Palmer in his book, The Courage to Teach. And he said that, the best teachers are those who take the subject and put it at the middle of a community, and that they connect people directly to that subject. So much so because, and the reason the leader does that is that he realizes what he calls the grace of the great thing. In other words, this cause right here in the middle, if he puts that, or this subject, if he puts that in the middle, that's most important to him, then because he's so committed to that cause, he wants to build a community that is not only committed to him, but is committed to this cause directly. And so to me, one of the challenges and one of the ways to keep this cause community in balance is for me constantly to put the cause in the middle, to talk about it in places of adventure, but realize that the cause by itself needs a community that is connected both to me, to each other, and to this cause. Most teachers think about leadership or think about, teaching. I keep mixing the metaphors here. Think about in this way, is that here's the subject, here I am as the teacher, or, in this instance, here I am as the leader, in that since I'm more committed to anybody else to this cause, the cause, in a sense, is articulated through my ability to challenge, and here are the followers down here, here's the leader, and here's the cause right here. And most of us, think about leadership like that often, just like we think about teaching. The reality is then the teacher is the center. This particular model, the subject is the center, and students get connected directly to the subject. I'm mixing a little bit of metaphor, but I'll make the connection here in a minute. So in this instance, with the teacher as the model, if the student sees something about the subject that the teacher doesn't see, then the teacher, because of his previous experience, is threatened because he's the center of the teaching environment. Okay? So here, however, if this student sees something about the subject the teacher, because he's so passionate about the subject itself and its center, he's excited about the passion that the student and the learning of the student has for the subject. So similarly, let's make that a leadership model. My goal is to build a community around this great cause, to pull people into a place of community, caring, and celebration in which the cause is central, not me as a teacher. So I pull myself out. I join this community of in a sense, co-owners of the cause. And so when I think about leadership, and try to balance that. Both of these things are critical. This community and this connection to the cause, and that I'm driven by this passion of this adventure, this cause, this quest of stealing the gold the dragon has stolen. And so if I can get that in my head, and I build my leadership environment in such a way that the cause is central, and I'm demonstrating courage, and I'm putting it in the middle and saying the kingdom of God is like a treasure hidden in a field. All of you're going to want to sell everything to get this treasure. If I talk about it like that, then it keeps me from this, where followers are simply getting the cause through me, or connected to the cause through my ability to passion. So if I'm building a movement somewhere, at another campus, for example, I want to make sure that the cause is central, and then there's a community that is being built that's connected to one another and to me, that's connected intimately with this cause. And then pretty soon, I don't even need to be in this scenario anymore, because now this person is now leading and then creating other causes that are central, in other communities, and the whole multiplication process that we know about is taking place. But it only happens if we put the cause central and we are concerned about community, at least in my thinking. I sound like I really know what I'm doing, but sort of a guess here. But anyway. Okay, I don't want to push people against the time schedule here, Stacy, so you kind of guide the end of this here and see what we want to do here.
Okay. Any more quick questions before we take off? Okay. Jay, well, thank you so much. This has been so helpful as a leader, and so as I think about it, I think of the things I've done poorly and the things I've done well, and so it's good to see how I can grow as a leader, and this is good stuff. So
great.
Very,
well, thanks everybody for taking the time. I know we're all busy, so appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank
Okay.
you.
You bet.
Thanks. It was great.